part 2 in the Sony Vegas 12 tutorials, basics. In this episode I'm going to be covering looping, basic effects and basic rendering. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up from where I left off, which was to do with the text that we had generated within the track on the screen. So from here you can do a number of things, as I discussed in the last episode. Obviously the colour is here. You have a slider, or you can choose the actual numbers itself to be more precise. Among other things though, you can obviously change it to your liking. So if my computer will let me, it will change this to, for the purposes of the tutorial. And no need to save it, because that would mean that I was creating a template. No need to create a template, I just want to create the text. Okay, so we have our text on the screen there. Now that's all being well at the minute, but we might actually want our text to do something. You know, we might not just want it to stay in the middle of the screen like that and then flash before our media. So to get started with that, you're going to need to tell Sony Vegas that you want it to combine all your tracks into one playable, piece of video and audio. So to do that, you're just going to click in the area above your media items and just double click, and that will snap everything into place, and it will create a looping region where Sony Vegas will recognize all your items and render them. Well, either render them or play them all together as one item. So now we can click play from start to play the item. As you can see, because our tutorial text is at the beginning, that was a bit of a fail, a bit too loud. That's bringing me to another point. This is why a lot of the time it's a good idea to have each individual item with each individual track, because then you can edit the individual features within the item. Like for example, that was way too loud then, so I need to turn down the sound on this track so that it's not playing as loud. Okay, so if I play it again now, maybe turn it down a bit more. If I play it again now from the start, it's going to play our text and then it's going to play the item, obviously because they're in that order. So it's finished playing the text, and now it's going to play the intro, because that's what we told it to do. So we can switch this up a bit now. We want to go stop it for a second. We can move the text that we have created over to the right, and we can move the intro over to the left, so that now after it's finished playing the intro, we snap it into place, it will play the text that we have created. As you can see, it's playing the intro, and then it will cycle through to the text that we have put into the timeline. And there we go, there's the text. So that's the basics of looping and getting Sony Vegas to work through your items as one. Next, I think it's a good idea to cover the basic effects. So probably the most basic one is crossfading and fading in and out your clips, whether it be to one into the next clip or fading out to the end or to the start of a video. And the easiest way to do that is by literally crossing them over within each individual track. So for example, here we have the intro on its separate track, and we have the text that we created on the separate track. Now you could, if you wanted to technically just drag this onto the video track, and it would work the same way. You would just cross it over with the item. There you can see it's got a 1 second crossfade into the item, but like I was saying, it's better to have its own individual track, just for tracking purposes and just ease of access more than anything. So I'm going to crossfade. If I zoom in a bit so we can see a bit better, I'm going to crossfade the text that we created in with the intro for about a second, maybe about 2 seconds. So you would drag it overlaced about there. Now if I play it, I'll play from the option where we started, you'll see now obviously that looks a bit shoddy at the minute. Might drag it in a bit actually. There you go, you can see that it crossfaded on the way out with our text that we created. That's the basics of it. It's pretty easy. I mean, if you was wanting to just fade out instead of crossfading, then you can grab the either end of the item that you wanted to fade. So for example, just move this out of the way here. I want to fade this out so that the sound and the visuals go out along with the video. You can just go into the corner that you want to fade it and literally just drag it into the offset to the position that you wanted it. So as you can see there, that's fading out 1 second. So depending on how long you drag it will depend on how long it fades. So I'll do it for about 4 seconds just to highlight the issue. There we go, and we'll play it from here. And you can see it faded out the visual and it faded out the audio. So that's basics of crossfading. I'll go into that in more depth in later tutorials. The next thing I want to cover is adding effects to the text that we have created. So as you can see, we have our text here, and I'm going to bring it back to the beginning. Stop this. We have this text that we created. Now at the minute it's a bit bland, it's just text in the middle of a black screen. But there's things we can do to it to make it more interesting. The biggest thing is probably animation, which I will show you just the sort of the basics and how it works. Not just the basics and the layout. If you click the button with the arrows in the track, the visual track, it'll bring up this here. This is the basic orientation or the basic positioning of your lettering relative to the screen. From here you can do all sorts of things. You can change the position, and then you can add a keyframe, obviously, to animate it. This is all 2D, bear in mind. If you wanted to make something more complicated, you'd have to 3D it, which I will go into in later videos. I'll show you how to animate your lettering and whatnot. But that's just to give you an idea of some of the stuff you can do. Obviously, if I was to change the X position, it would move on the X axis. If I was to change the Y position, it would move on the Y axis. And then down here you can save those position changes as a keyframe and then play your animation through, so it will show you what your lettering would do. I hope I explained that. It's quite difficult to explain. Like I say, I will be showing you that eventually. So that's one sort of effects, if you will. Most basic effects is the transitions. So in this window here that we have created, there's something called, if you click here, you'll see transitions after you've selected the item. And what we want to do is we want to click transitions, and you'll get all these options on the left hand side of the screen. Like I say, don't be daunted by too many of the names, because a lot of them are self-explanatory, and if you click them they'll give you good examples as to what they are. I'm just going to say now, for this purposes, I'm going to use a push in, push out effect, which will literally just push our text in from the bottom and then fix it to the other text. So if we look for push on this side, as you can see, when I was saying examples, Sony Vegas gives you lots of examples as to what it is. So the one that I want is from this one here. Now it's pretty easy. Like I say, the way that effects work and transitions work in Sony Vegas is you get the item that you want to add the effect to, you get the item that you want to, the effect that you want to use even, and you literally just drag it onto the beginning of the text, and that will associate the effect with the text that we have created. From here you can, if you wanted to edit it and you wanted to customize the options for the effect, you can do so and save it, and then save it as a template. For now I'm not going to do that, I just want the effect. So now we've added the effect to our text, so instead of just being bland and staying on the screen and then playing our intro, it should pop into the screen now to start with. So if we snap our loop into place by double clicking on the track area and then we click play from start, we can watch the effect work. As you see, it came in from the bottom and then it came into the middle of the screen. So we've got the basic effect working. As you can see, that's the basics of adding a transition or an effect to your media. There's lots of other items here. It would take me ages to go through them all, so I'm not going to, but as you can see, there's tons and tons of options that you can go through and test out for yourself and mess about with, and fun things you can do with your media to make it look cool and professional. Okay, so before I forget, and before we move on to the rendering, there's one important thing that I need to mention for everyone making videos, high definition, quite long videos. Make sure that on each clip of your video that you right click it and you go to properties. Make sure that you disable resample, because this will create artifacts in your video and make it look laggy and just make your video look really nasty. So it's important to remember that you need to do this so that Sony Vegas won't take screenshots and then overlace them within the rendered video. So just go through your clips and all your media that you have created, and one by one just go to the properties and disable the resample. And once you've done that, then we can move on to the rendering. I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so now you will want to render your video. You'll be asking, that's all been well, you've shown me how to use the basics, but how can I output my work to a video? Well, it's quite easy. For a start, you'll want to go to File, make sure you save all your work so far as something that you can remember, and then that means also that you can come back and edit it before you wanted to render it again, wanted to change it. So save it. Once you're done, go back to File and click Render As. Now a lot of this will tie into the first video when I was saying you set up the properties and you edit the project around the way you want it. So a lot of that will tie into this now that we are doing, and all of these settings will already be set up from that. But just for the sake of making sure it works for you and it's right, I'll show you the settings that I use and the settings that I found to work the best. So you're going to go to Windows Media Video version 11 WMV and select a template. Obviously you can see I'm using is YouTube 1080p custom, the one that I created in the beginning, but we're going to edit it a tiny bit more. So I'm going to go on, click it, and then scroll down and go on customize template. Now this is why I said you might not want to set up the template at the beginning, because it's a good idea to do it here at the final, at the final milestone of editing your video. Obviously from here you're going to want to have it nicely set up. So to start with, make sure that your mode is on CBR. The Windows Media Audio will usually be set at default on the best one, so I'd leave that as it is. On the video, again, CBR, you make sure your image size is set to 190/20. Sorry. Make sure your width is set to 1920 and make sure your height is set to 1080. Make sure your pixel aspect ratio is 1, and the frame rate obviously is set the way we had it set in Bandicam, so 29.970 is usually the default anyway. The seconds per keyframe, you'll want that on 5, and this is usually set to 3. I just leave that as it is. The sharpness 100. Obviously you want your videos to be as sharp and as crisp as possible. So once you've done there, you can move on to bitrate. Mine is set to 8 because my internet isn't the best, but if yours is, if you have a decent internet connection along with a decent modem in your computer, you can bump that up to, I'd say, around 12. The index summary and the index summary you can leave as it is. I wouldn't worry about that one. The video rendering quality. Now, as I was saying, this will usually depend on how you set it up at the beginning, which I explained in the first video. But you can always, it doesn't hurt to move this down to best, obviously, just to make sure that everything is rendering in the best quality that it can. And then you can click OK. Once you've done all that and you've set it up as you want it to, make sure that you save it in the name that you'll remember, so you can then use this template over and over again just to render multiple videos without having to ever change anything, really. So do that and click save, and it'll save your template, and click OK. So that's basically it. Once you have finished your template and you've got it there, you can click render, and based on the area that you had it output to, obviously up here you can see I've got it set to my C drive desktop rendered movies file. You can change this to whichever directory you want to, and then once you're done, click render, and your video will be away. Okay guys, so I'm gonna leave that here. I've explained everything I had on my list for today. I'll go into a few more things in a bit more detail within the next tutorials. So yeah, catch you guys later.